Hi, friends. How are you guys doing? I hope you're doing well. So, today I want to talk about a metaphor that's very helpful for me. I actually mentioned it. Maybe if I move my phone up, we'll get better volume. Yeah, okay. Maybe that's better, right? So, I actually mentioned this metaphor a couple of videos ago, like two or three if I remember correctly. And the metaphor is steering the ship. And yeah, it's been really helpful for me. So, if you've never been on a sailboat or operated a sailboat, then this is not obvious. But when you use a sailboat, if you're in a one-person sailboat, you generally have one hand that's holding the sheet, the rope that's connected to the sail. And with that, you can control the angle of the sail and how much tension is on the sail. And then your other hand will be on the rudder, which steers the boat, right? Now, it's really actually a beautiful thing. And, I miss sailing. I did it when I was a kid. But it's the rudder that we're really talking about when we say steer the ship, right? Like the power, the tension comes from the sheet. But steering a ship is all on the rudder. And of course, if this is the back of the boat, the rudder is literally just basically a plank that's sticking out like this. And when you move the rudder, when you move the till of the rudder, rather, it's moving this way, and that will cause the boat to move this direction. And if you move it this direction, it'll do the opposite, right? Very basic. Now, what is completely unhelpful when you're sailing is taking the rudder and swinging it to one direction or the other. If that happens, if you try to make a huge adjustment all at once, the rudder, if this is the back of the ship again, the rudder will go like this, and the boat will almost just like rock or something, because there's no water passing over the rudder to actually make the steering happen. You basically just like slammed it, or you'll start spinning in circles, or it's just you learn that the effective way to steer the ship is to move with subtlety. Sometimes there are big adjustments, and sometimes there are very, very fine adjustments. But really, it's more about a balance, because especially if you're moving really fast, in a sailboat, and then your adjustments don't have to be, because there's so much water passing over the rudder, there's so much force in your movement. So even small movements can really change the angle. And this becomes even more important when you have a huge ship. And I guess we all know this anecdotally, but if you have like a cargo, a freight liner, or something like that, these ships take a tremendous amount of effort to steer. And the insight really is that, if you're in like a pirate ship, right? You have this like big steering wheel, right? Well, that's a huge ship, so you get a big wheel because it allows you to make much smaller adjustments than if you had a tiny wheel. A single degree of adjustment is going to be a huge amount. So why a big wheel? So you can make these nice, you're calibrated to make a smaller degree adjustment with each movement, right? That's because it would be even more disastrous to just like slam the rudder in one direction or the other if you had a big ship. And also we all know that like when these cargo ships are moving into ports and stuff, they start slowing down. I forget how far away it is from the actual port, but the ship starts slowing down, miles before or something like that, because there's so much weight behind the ship. And similarly, if you're in a ship and you're traveling this direction and your goal is to turn around or turn 90 degrees, it's always a small course corrections that get you there. If you try to just turn around a ship on a dime, it simply doesn't work that way. That's actually can be sort of dangerous. Anyway, so the metaphor is probably obvious, but there's so many times in our life when we try to make quantum shifts, when we try to change everything at once. Maybe let's say like if you're a person who like drinks and smokes and gambles, people will often try to give up all three things at once. That's like trying to turn the ship around and in 90-degree angles by spinning the wheel or slamming the rudder to one side. I have never found any success with that for myself. And honestly, I don't see people succeeding that way either. It's small incremental shifts that allow for you to change direction. And that's how it's worked for me. Like, I used to have a lot of issues with substance abuse. I was a big drinker back in the day. I've been sober for 12 years or something like that. A long time now. I can't even imagine life. Oh man, there's a lot to say on that for sure. A lot of experience with alcohol. But that's a long topic. But anyway, in general, in life, we want to make these small adjustments in order to have big impacts. And that's what I mean by steering the ship. It's also, when I go back to my sailing days, there's also this sensitivity that's involved. When you have your one hand on the sheet and one hand on the rudder, until I can't remember the terms, whatever, but there's this tension that happens between, you can feel what the wind is doing in one hand, and you can feel what the water is doing in the other hand. And it becomes, what's the word I'm looking for? It becomes not an idea, not a concept anymore, but a physical experience of what's happening. Non-conceptual, there we go. It becomes non-conceptual. In that you just have a sense for what the water and the wind are doing simultaneously. And these two hands work together to move the boat in subtle ways. So that sensitivity, I think, is an important aspect too of steering the ship, right? Because in order to make these positive changes in your life or in our lives, in order to move in a direction or change directions, we have to be very sensitive to what's happening. And to me, that means knowing the state of the mind and the state of the body, being very reflective about it. And I think that's just really a matter of intention and practice. A lot of times, there were times in my life when I was really struggling, when very close friends of mine were able to ask very simple questions like, how does it feel when you do that? Or do you think you could go without that? Or just very simple questions that in retrospect, you'd be like, how did I not ask myself that? It was so simple. But it's because we don't have enough attention, that same sensitivity with the rudder and the sail, that becomes a non-conceptual experience of what's happening inside of us. It's very, very important. If you can bring a lot of attention, like, I'll give you a good example with the body, right? Like, a lot of people who start working out injure themselves. It happens a whole lot. And a lot of times it's just because people aren't paying attention to the fact that their muscles are super sore, or, and they just get, almost everyone burns out. And I think a big part of it is because we just are trying to turn 180 degrees. We're like, spend all of our time on playing computer games and smoking weed, and then the next week we want to be an athlete, right? And we train like an athlete. Well, you can get there for sure, but it won't be sustainable unless you make these small course corrections. And when you look back in your life, like I did about alcohol a while ago, I mean, that was 180 degrees change. And man, it just seems like it was magical. And I felt that way even a couple of years into stopping drinking. So anyway, I hope that metaphor serves you well. And if you have any comments, criticisms, questions, let me know down in the comments, or anything like that. I love to connect with everyone. So hope you're having a great day, and I'll see you on the next one. Bye.